Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. You think you know yourself, your limits, and your boundaries, until suddenly you're faced with a situation that challenges everything you thought you understood. My name is Lisa, and I've been married to my husband, David, for 6 years. We have a beautiful daughter, a cozy home, and a routine that feels as comfortable as a worn-in sweater. But sometimes, comfort can make you complacent, and it takes only one unexpected moment to change the course of everything you thought was set in stone. David's younger brother, Ryan, has always been a part of our lives. He's charming, funny, and easygoing, the kind of person who lights up a room just by walking into it. He's the life of the party, always ready with a joke or a story that has everyone laughing. But beneath that carefree exterior, there's a complexity to Ryan that I've never quite been able to figure out. He's always had a bit of a wild streak, living life on his own terms, and it's something I've both admired and envied. Ryan and David are close, and he's been a regular presence in our home ever since we got married. He's great with our daughter, treating her like the little sister he never had. But there was always this unspoken tension between Ryan and me, nothing overt, just a feeling I couldn't quite put my finger on. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I was reading too much into harmless interactions. But looking back, I realized those small moments were adding up, laying the groundwork for something neither of us could see coming. It all started on a rainy Saturday afternoon. David had to work late, leaving me alone at home with our daughter. Ryan called to see if he could stop by and hang out since he was in the neighborhood. I didn't think twice about it. Ryan was family, and besides, he was great company. He showed up with a bag of takeout and a six-pack, ready to turn an otherwise dreary day into something a little more fun. We settled in the living room, chatting about everything and nothing while our daughter napped upstairs. As the rain tapped against the windows, I felt the familiar ease of Ryan's presence. He had this way of making everything feel lighter, of turning even the most mundane moments into something special. We talked about work, the latest movies, and David's obsession with his new project at work. It was all harmless, lighthearted, the kind of conversation we'd had 100 times before. But there was an undercurrent, a subtle shift in the atmosphere that I couldn't quite pinpoint. At one point, Ryan leaned back on the couch, his gaze lingering on me longer than usual. "You know, Lisa, you've done an amazing job with this place. It feels like a real home." His voice was soft, his eyes thoughtful, and I felt a warmth spread through me at the compliment. "Thanks, Ryan," I replied, smiling. "It's been a lot of work, but it's worth it. You've always been the one who holds everything together," he continued, his tone more serious. "David's lucky to have you. You're special." I laughed it off, trying to deflect the compliment. "Oh, come on, I'm just doing what needs to be done." But Ryan wasn't laughing. He was watching me intently, his expression serious in a way that caught me off guard. "I mean it, Lisa. You're one of a kind." There was something in the way he said it, a weight to his words that made my heart beat just a little faster. I felt a flicker of something, interest, attraction? I wasn't sure, but it was enough to make me shift uncomfortably on the couch. I told myself it was just Ryan being his usual charming self, that I was overthinking things. But deep down, I knew there was more to it. As the afternoon wore on, we moved to the kitchen to make coffee. Ryan stood close, his arm brushing against mine as he reached for a mug. It was such a small, innocent touch, but it sent a jolt of electricity through me. I glanced up, and our eyes met. For a moment, it felt like the world had shrunk down to just the two of us, the air thick with an unspoken tension. I turned away, trying to focus on the task at hand, but I could feel Ryan's gaze on me, could sense the shift in the room. We were towing the line, and I knew it. I told myself to keep my distance, to remember that Ryan was family, that this was David's brother. But it was hard. Ryan had this magnetic pull, this easy charm that made it difficult to stay on the right side of that invisible boundary. "Lisa," he said softly, his voice low, almost hesitant. I looked up, and he was closer than I'd realized, his eyes searching mine. "Do you ever wonder if things could have been different?" His question caught me off guard, and I stared at him, my mind racing. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He shrugged, but there was a vulnerability in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. I don't know. Sometimes I think about how things could have turned out if... He trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the air. I felt my pulse quicken, a mix of fear and excitement coursing through me. Ryan, we can't. We shouldn't even be talking like this, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I know, he said, taking a step closer, but I can't help it. I look at you, and I see everything I've ever wanted, but could never have. I wanted to tell him to stop, to walk away before we crossed a line we couldn't uncross. But I couldn't find the words. Because the truth was, I'd felt it too. The pull, the attraction, the sense that there was something between us that went beyond family ties. And standing there, so close to him that I could feel his breath on my skin, it was impossible to deny. Without thinking, I reached up and touched his face, my fingers grazing the stubble on his jaw. It was such a simple gesture, but it was like a spark igniting a flame. Ryan's eyes darkened, and before I knew it, his lips were on mine, the kiss searing and desperate, like we were both trying to make up for lost time. It was wrong, I knew that, but in that moment, it felt like the most right thing in the world. We pulled apart, both of us breathing heavily, and I stared at him, my mind spinning. What are we doing, Ryan? I whispered, my voice cracking with emotion. I don't know, he said, his forehead resting against mine. But I can't pretend I don't feel this. I took a step back, reality crashing down around me. We have to stop. This can't happen. Ryan nodded, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. I know. I'm sorry, Lisa. I didn't mean to. It's okay, I said quickly, though it was anything but. We need to keep our distance. For David. For the family. He agreed, and we spent the rest of the day avoiding each other, each lost in our own thoughts. But the kiss, the moment, lingered like a shadow, a constant reminder of the line we'd crossed. I told myself it was a mistake, that we'd both gotten caught up in the moment, and it wouldn't happen again. But it wasn't that simple. The next few days were a blur of tension and awkwardness. Ryan stayed away, making excuses to be out of the house as much as possible, and I threw myself into taking care of our daughter, trying to distract myself from the mess I'd created. David noticed my unease, asked if everything was okay, but I brushed it off, blaming it on work stress. I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth, to admit that I'd betrayed him in the worst possible way. One evening, while David was putting our daughter to bed, Ryan cornered me in the kitchen. I was washing dishes, my back turned, when I felt his presence behind me. I tensed, knowing this conversation was inevitable, but dreading it all the same. Lisa, we need to talk, he said quietly. I turned around, drying my hands on a towel, and faced him. There's nothing to talk about, Ryan, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. What happened, it was a mistake. He shook his head, frustration etched on his face. Maybe it was, but it doesn't change how I feel. You can't tell me you didn't feel it too? I sighed, rubbing my temples. Of course I felt it, but that doesn't make it right. This can't happen, Ryan. We can't hurt David like this. Ryan looked away, running a hand through his hair. I know. I don't know how to make these feelings go away. Neither do I admitted, my voice softening. But we have to try. For David. For our family. He nodded, and for a moment, we just stood there, the weight of our unspoken emotions hanging heavy between us. Then, without another word, Ryan turned and left, leaving me alone with the wreckage of my choices. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, things started to go back to normal. Ryan kept his distance, and I focused on my marriage, determined to make things right with David. I threw myself into being the best wife and mother I could be, hoping that if I tried hard enough, I could erase the memory of that kiss, of the moment when everything had changed. But the truth is, some things can't be undone. The memory of that day with Ryan lingered like a ghost, a reminder of how easy it is to lose your way when you're not paying attention. I knew I'd made a mistake, a choice that could have destroyed everything I held dear. But I also knew that I'd learned something important, that sometimes the biggest threat to what you have isn't from the outside, but from within. In the end, I chose my family. I chose to fight for the life I'd built with David, to protect the things that truly mattered. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight. But slowly, day by day, I found my way back to what was important. And I realized that while temptation is always lurking, it's up to us to decide which path to take. My advice to anyone who find themselves in a similar situation? Don't let a moment of weakness destroy everything you've worked for. Take a step back, remember what's truly valuable, and make the choice that will lead you back to where you belong. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about what you want in the moment. It's about the life you want to build, the legacy you want to leave behind. And that's something worth fighting for.